Hello everyone, welcome back to the tutorial on ISTQB. We'll be getting started with the content now. It's the very first tutorial on the series about ISTQB, which we are getting started with the very first chapter today. So this tutorial will basically drive you through the first topic of the ISTQB Foundation. So before we get started, I would like to also explain you another part of it. Based on ISTQB standards, we mark each topic with some knowledge level. Now, when you say the knowledge level here is basically the K1, K2, K3, K4 right now on the screen. So basically the K word stands for knowledge. That means what kind of knowledge you need to have about that topic in order to answer the questions appearing in the examination. So K1 stands for remember. That means it would be limited to a definition kind of thing, or maybe terminology, and even in the examination they won't ask you beyond that. So if any topic is marked with K1, that's knowledge level K1, then it is just limited to definition of that particular term or understanding or meaning behind that term. When you talk about K2, it basically stands for understand. Now the word understand means that you must know how to implement it. They don't want you to implement it, but you must know how the process is implemented. So most probably K2 would be used like a concept, summary, or kind of determination about a term at a little detailed way. And you will be also supposed to be aware of that particular details about that methodology or maybe a process or creating a relation between that. Looking at the K3, we have apply. So these are basically some kind of applications. That means whatever topics are marked with K3, you are supposed to apply those understandings and derive the outcomes of it, and based on that the answer will be selected. Whereas for K4 we call it as analyze. The analyze word stands here, or the meaning of the analyze at K4 means it's not going to be just limited to implementation and getting the output of it. Here the output will be further analyzed to derive the answer. So maybe a particular scenario will be given to you, and from that particular scenario you will be deriving something out by implementing that methodology or technique. The outcome of that analysis will be further analyzed to finally derive the answer. So we'll be looking at these kind of concepts when we come to it, but I just wanted to give you a quick understanding about the same thing. So let's proceed ahead. We'll be starting with the chapter 1 as discussed earlier in the previous tutorial. I told you there are 6 chapters which we will be discussing into, and here are some of the 6 chapters listed, and we are just getting started with the very first chapter, that is fundamentals of testing. So here, fundamentals of testing, we'll be looking at some of the topics what you can see on the screen right now. We have got why is testing necessary, what's the significance and importance of it. Following that, 1.2 is what is testing. 7 testing principles. We do have some standard principles to be followed as a part of testing, so that would be another thing. Following that, what is the fundamental test process and the psychology of testing. So here there are a lot of fundamental concepts what will be discussed one after the other, which you get started with, and following that we'll be getting into the depth of each one of these, or maybe understanding some other topics as well. So without wasting much of your time, let's get started with the content. And if you see, the very first topic under why is testing necessary is software system context, and it is marked with level K1. That means just a brief idea that what is software system altogether. So let me just give you an understanding here. Software systems are basically a part of our life already. Like if you see today, in today's area, like 21st century, everywhere you see a lot of products which you rely on, the dependency what is created as of now. You talk about online payments, you talk about the shopping security, booking the flights, booking the train tickets. You don't believe in visiting the counter tickets or visiting the counter or visiting an agent. Rather, you know on everything on your fingertips. We're talking about the smartphones having a lot of apps. Everything is so created that we are now as a part of technology. Earlier, we can say that the technology is a part of our life, but now we are actually a part of the technology. Beyond that, obviously, when we talk about such complex applications where what you can think of is already available in the market. You think of, I wish I could do something, and maybe the next day somebody will come up with a startup idea or innovation and they can create that for you. But at the same point of time, when you talk about the earlier days, we used to face a lot of challenge with these kind of complex applications, or maybe some simple things as well. And not only limited to the software products, we are also talking about the hardware products, where the challenges were being faced, where the products were not showing the accurate measurements or the precise results of the product or something, and we used to complain, or rather come back with the service stations asking them to repair your product or something, and still you don't get the satisfaction from the client or the particular organization who has released the product. So it used to become a lot of challenge when we talk about creating such things. And on the other side, when you talk about applications like this, which are not being, working properly, then obviously it can lead to a lot of problems. The problems could be not only limited to the wrong outputs, wrong calculation, or wrong, actual details, actual results. It can be beyond that, like, dealing with a lot of money loss, maybe the human lives loss. So when you talk about aerospace crashes, like flight crashes and all those things, that's basically because of one or the other way the system is not working properly, or maybe it is not tested precisely. So that can basically lead to the death of human beings who are on board in the flight. Maybe when you talk about doing some type of transfer using the online banking facility, and you do make a transfer or transaction using that, and you realize that the transaction has taken place, there is a debit on your account, but the amount has not reached the right person, and the bank says we have already debited your account, but sometime like it does not reach the person, then obviously it becomes a challenge for people to manage those things. And thus we don't want these problems to exist anymore, which does not give any kind of trust, reliability, or satisfaction to the end user. So being talking about why testing is necessary, this is what is the importance part, where you start with that what is today's era, how do we face challenges, and what could be the outcomes of that or result of that, and we try to avoid these things to happen by conducting testing. Why is testing necessary? There's a second topic here called as causes of software defects. So we're just trying to here understand that what are the common reasons of defects being introduced into the system. So before that, let's understand some of the basic terminologies here, where you see that I've got three terms here called as an error, I've got fault, and then I've got failure. So if you see, these three terms look similar, but they're not the same. When we start with the first term here called as error, the mistake, or also known as a mistake, it is basically an human action that produces an incorrect result, like anything where a human goes wrong. And you do that in any kind of environment, or exclusively when you talk about error, it is basically the programming environment where you do such mistakes, where we first start working with. It can also be called as mistake because this error can be done even in the documentation where you prepare like requirement, or you work with design and preparation of these kind of workflow, control flow, and so many things. We do make mistakes there because we humans are error prone. But this is what we try to understand from the beginning, that error is something which human action can produce as incorrect results. So if you make mistakes during these implementations of design or the code, we call it as an error. If this error goes unidentified, it turns into fault in the system, or this is also detected as a defect. And even the informal name of defect is also a bug. So you can basically go ahead and understand the terminology in more detail. So as per ISTQB, these are the precise terminologies to be used, but internally we do understand there's a lot of organization who uses bug as an internal defect and defect as an external one, which is found by the customer. A discrepancy which is found by you internally, that is the development team, is called as a bug, and if the customer finds it, you call it as a defect. But that is dependent or limited to the organization standards. It's not the ISTQB standards, but when you're talking about preparing for the ISTQB certification, then you have to stick to the terminologies and understanding of the standards of ISTQB. So that's where ISTQB says that fault is something which is a manifestation of an error in the software. So basically, it is an outcome or resultant of an error which is performed earlier. So you call it as fault, which makes a particular module or particular functionality disabled or does not let do its intended task. Also known as defect or bug, as I've told you earlier, and that can be basically, you find it out when you start interacting with the application or you execute your certain test cases, and then you say that, okay, this particular module is not working. The third thing here is the word failure. Failure is basically an approach which is conducted as a part of testing to find defects. So in layman level, I can say that when you talk about failure, it's the term which is conducted as a part of execution. So you prepare a test case, you execute it, and then you find it like it is not fail, the status of the execution is fail, then you call it as a failure. Failure are conducted to detect defects during the testing process. So also can be called as deviation of the software from its expected delivery or services. So putting this all together, it is where you start with, which results into fault, and fault can be detected by conducting failures on the application. Moving to the next continuation of the same topic, what are the common causes? What do you think that these are the common causes which basically initiates the introduction of defect? So if you see here, very first thing we are talking about is human being is error prone. That means a human being is obviously, as I agreed to that, or we agree to that, is human being is error prone. That means we humans can make mistakes. We are not machines. We cannot be so precise all the time. But now there are possibilities, what you can see below that, like who knows something but not everything. That means a person who is doing the job, he knows few of the things but not everything, and then you try to make sure that you just try to find out the right person for the job, and you try to create that profile where the person has all the information to overcome this barrier. So it's common that there might be someone who have the skill but aren't perfect on that. So it's possible that a person knows what exactly the techniques are in testing, how does it work, and so on, and then you can try out working with the perfectness, but usually you don't know how to precisely put into the practices and so on. Beyond that, who do make mistakes, obviously these are the people who make common mistakes. Beyond this, there are also some constraints like pressure, complex code, complex infrastructure, changing technology. The trend says that during the project you do have a lot of pressures involved. You can say it as like time pressure, and the pressures from the client about delivery on time. Strict guidelines can also be a part of it. Complex code, like how we try with the changing technology. Every day we are having new trends coming into picture, including the complex code. So as the complexity increases, the probability of getting defects is higher, because we do tend to do mistakes in more complex components rather than simpler components. So that's where we are basically increasing the probability of getting defects when dealing with more and more complex applications day by day. Beyond that, there are certain concerns which is like related to environment. Environment is basically like where you talk about radiation, magnetism, electronic field, and pollution. So here, what I mean to say is the constraint like pressure and all is the part of the applications like the softwares, and environmental conditions are basically from the hardware, the product based. So if you are talking about any such product which are used externally, like a cell phone or maybe a laptop or maybe any kind of radio transistors or something, these deal with these kind of concepts. So what kind of radiation does it accept or creates, the magnetism, the magnetic field which is created, electronic field which is created, the pollution impacts on that particular product. Does it rust or something, or does it lose its properties, the metal properties or something? So we are basically giving you an approach right from the understanding of software as well as hardware here. So these are few of the constraints which basically deal with causes of defects. And it's not limited to this. This is just that I can fit into the slide. But yeah, there is a lot more which can basically influence the causes for defects. Role of testing in software development is basically understanding that how testing helps the entire development process. So when you talk about software development model, we try to fit the testing within that and seek an understanding that how testing gives us that significance within the process, that yes, testing is quite important to be conducted as a part of software development lifecycle. So if you see here, we also say that to some extent, rigorous testing of the systems and documentation can help you reduce risk of the problems in operation. So coming to the rigorous testing, basically rigorous testing is something where you go with the tight guidelines, strict entry and exit criteria, and probably you also try with all possible combination of that particular scenario. So we do say to some extent that exhaustive testing is impossible, where you try to create all possible combinations. But here in rigorous testing, where you think there's a criticality involved, there's a risk involved, you do try to go with all possible combinations just to make sure that all the flaws have been detected, all the defects have been covered, and you basically define the quality. It also contributes to quality of the software system, as stated as of now. Just the same thing I was talking about is like obviously testing being a part of the software development lifecycle also contributes to quality by improvising, detecting the defects, fixing them so that it does not happen in the real time. Software testing is not limited to quality, like defining the quality or something. We also helps in meeting some other requirements as well, like contractual requirement, legal requirement, industry specific standards. So all these things comes as basically as a part of your requirement. When you talk about the contract, you talk about the SLA, you talk about the business requirements, there are some legal sanctions, there are some standards to be followed. When you talk about safety critical systems, you talk about banking application and so on. So when you talk about these kind of applications, you also talk about testing, meeting such requirements, as well as a part of, maybe you can put it into acceptance testing, where you do fulfill all these contractual requirement, legal or standards and all. So it's just mean to say that testing is not limited to define the quality. There are many other things which will be catered as a part of testing. Testing and quality. In this particular topic, we are trying to create a relation between testing and quality. That is how testing and quality are related. So basically, testing is a medium with help of which you can measure the quality of the system. So there are various ways by which you can measure the quality of the system using testing. So the moment you start with the testing, number of test cases prepared, number of test cases executed, number of test cases passed, number of defects detected, number of severe defects detected, and how many defects you have resolved, how many defects are still open. So if you pull out all these matrices and you try to measure the effectiveness of testing, you basically find out that how quality oriented your process is that really helpful to detect more and more effective defects out of the process from the product, or you think that no, your test cases were not quite good enough to find any kind of defects. So defect becomes a medium or measurement of quality when we talk about the testing. So if your test cases are quite effective, are more enhanced, targeted towards finding the defects, then the measurement of these kind of entities, what I just said you, would definitely help you to measure the quality as a part of it. Also, as a part of software testing, we know that the team QA and QC basically builds the confidence on the quality of the product. As you go on testing, you have defined a lot of test cases, you have been executing them, and you have been finding defects, getting it fixed from the developers. Based on these analysis, you gain confidence, and you provide this confidence to a release management team that the product is now ready for release. Until unless you feel confident being a test engineer, you can basically not reflect that to a release management team that shall we go ahead with the release or not. So gaining confidence is also one of the primary objective of software testing. Obviously, software testing is quality-oriented process, so it basically helps you to build the quality in the system. In case lessons are learned from the previous project, it can also help improve the project, that is preventing defects. So you can also bring back the knowledge and experience from the similar type of previous projects what you would have dealt with, and you basically try to bring those information, recall that understanding of the previous projects, the common mistakes what you would have done, or common defects what you find. All those experience put together is called as basically lessons are learned, or lessons learned will definitely help improve your new upcoming projects or the ongoing projects. And obviously, as a return of that, it helps you to prevent the defects being introduced in the system. So that's basically to the extent of understanding at K2 that what is testing and quality and how they are related, how testing can help you improve quality, how testing can help you measure the quality. How much testing is enough is another content. What you look at is basically, this is a very big question to be answered at this point of time when you get started with the fundamentals. So yeah, in foundation, we are not talking in much detail about it. As you can see, it is at K2. We are not going to explore it in more detail. But yes, at the same time, we are going to understand that how much testing is enough. It's never enough. Basically, obviously, when you start working with it, you obviously say that at any point of time, when do you say that, are you done with the testing or not? So first of all, we do create an exit criteria, and we say that what exactly is your exit criteria. If it is met, you can proceed with it. So if exit criteria meets whatever you have defined at the point of calling off the testing phase, then you can say that yes, we are done with the enough testing. But basically, it starts right from the planning phase when you talk about the test estimation. Now, test estimation deals with a lot of factors, which we will be talking about it in upcoming sessions in more detail, where all these factors will influence the test estimation, where test estimation will define how much testing would be enough for a particular product. Because if you ask a particular tester, a sincere tester, that how long do you need to test a particular module, then obviously he comes back with a question stating that what are the constraints involved? Because if you think there are constraints, then let me know, because I work under a confined limit. So if there are no constraints, even it can be an endless journey. So I always ask you back that what are the constraints? Then you say, okay, fine, I give you a day a time, and let me know how many test cases you can prepare. And you create enough and effective number of test cases and hand it over to me. Tomorrow I come back to you and again ask you, can you create some more test cases on this? And the person says, still, what are the constraints again today? So he said, I give you another 1 day and let me know what you can do the best. So he again prepares some good number of test cases, and this goes for a longer time. It is endless. So you cannot basically say that how much testing would be enough. So we depend on some constraints, which basically let us define how much testing would be sound enough to release this product. Because we understand and we agree to that, we do not test everything to the 100% extent. Because again, we say that exhaustive testing is quite impossible. It's not realistic to be executed. So that's where we try to make sure that, how much testing would be enough is a big question to be answered, and we'll be taking it in more details as we proceed ahead. So if you say it's never enough, yeah, obviously you can say that it's never enough at any point of time. When you have done what you have planned, no, it does not mean that when you have done what you planned, it does not mean that you have tested enough, because your planning would be about something specific, not everything. When your customer is happy, customer would definitely not be happy if you just deliver him something which is not tested completely. So your estimation would consider a lot of other factors compared to customer's happiness at that point of time to deliver the product. When you have proved that the system works correctly, yes, that sounds a genuine point, which you can say that, yeah, you have certain goals which were defined during the test plan and you have achieved them to prove that the system works correctly. When you are confident, so one is the proving the system, and second is confident that the system works correctly, yes, that could be another one. And it depends on the risk of a system, absolutely yes. Because one of the constraints of defining how much testing would be enough is to consider the risk items or the risk areas in the application, and based on which you can maybe create enough and effective number of test cases. Also, you can prioritize your testing process, which helps you to define the best coverage in the limited period of time. And that's where what you find it is the risk is one of the criteria or one of the parameter or primary parameter to be considered to define how much testing is enough. All right, so what you see here is why is testing necessary? Again, how much testing is enough continued. We do consider the level of risk, includes technical safety, business risk. So there are a lot of other constraints. What you can see, as I was talking about, it also includes the time and budget, because in case you run out of time, you cannot further continue with the testing. You run out of the budget, you cannot continue with the testing. If there is a business risk involved, you do consider that as a part of your testing. If a technical safety is one of the major concerns, then you take care of that as a part of deciding how much testing would be enough. So these are some typical the parameters or factors which influence to decide how much testing would be enough. But as you can see here, we have got a chapter number 5 which deals with more detail in that. So we'll be anyways, as we reach on the chapter 5, we'll be looking into more detailed understanding of how we can answer this question, that how much testing is enough. So let's look at this, and we have got some more interesting information here that obviously there are no enough time to conduct that. So little time and so much to test, which is a great statement to say. We always get the last thing to be done as a part of the development activity, and we are always given with a little time to do a lot of work. So test time always be limited. You cannot make changes to the organization depending on your practices or standards. Only you have to stick to the organization standards or follow the organization guidelines. The help of using the risk to determine is obviously it will help you to determine what to test first, what to test most, how thoroughly the test each item is, and what not to test at this point of time. So when you conduct, basically chapter 5 will be talking about risk-based testing. So understanding that how risk analysis has been done, and based on risk analysis, how do we prioritize our test cases. As we prioritize our test cases, we also understand the impact of risk and likelihood of that, based on which we can also further explore it, that how many more test cases to be prepared to uncover these kind of risk areas. If the impact of the risk is identified risk is severe or high, that is severity is high, then we talk about creating a more definite number of test cases. Whereas when the severity or impact of the risk is low, then we can actually talk about the tolerance there, or giving a kind of compromise, but not saying that completely eliminating the test and ignoring it. Well, we are considering it, but with limited number of test cases depending on the impact of the risk and probability of that risk to happen. Also, you can use risk to allocate the time available for testing by prioritizing tests. So in case you have already done a risk analysis on your requirement and understood that, okay, these are the risk areas, there are 5 risks which has high impact, there are 3 risks which are of medium impact, and there are few risks which are of low impact, then obviously you can push all the higher severity impact risk related test cases prioritized, so that these test cases are executed well within the time you have. And even if you run out of time, you will be basically skipping or moving the low severity risks to release or something. So that basically gives you a better coverage and good practice and all. But do not worry about it as of now, because we'll be discussing about the risk in the chapter 5 in more better way and detailed manner. So as of now, this is from the chapter 1, the very first topic, why is testing necessary? And hope we have answered the question that what is the importance of testing in development lifecycle and today's era, like the real world scenarios dealing in your day-to-day life, what role does testing play in your life. So in this tutorial, as of now, this is what we have. Coming up with another tutorial with the next topic, that is chapter 1, topic 1.2, what is testing. So stay tuned. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Also hit the bell icon to get notified with the latest posts on the video. and also get notified as soon as the new series or new video is updated in the series. So that makes you stay updated with the latest news on the tutorials. So stay tuned. Hope you have learned.